From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt. Our colleague Noel is on an adventure, but will be returning shortly.
They call me Ben. We're joined, as always, with our super producer, Andrew the Triforce Howard. Most importantly, you are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. Previously on Stuff They Don't Want You to Know, we explored the historical and geopolitical context surrounding something called the Darién Gap. We spent a lot of time on that. It was sort of chapter one of a two-chapter series because we needed to lay out deep precedents leading to the Gap's current reputation, as well as its role as a massive land route for migration and crime. And Matt, I know we were talking a little off air. This is particularly close to a lot of us and our social groups here in Atlanta because of recent moves regarding migration or regarding deportation attempts and apprehending undocumented people and families. And yeah, to be clear, folks, this is not just an Atlanta thing. It's happening around the U.S. as we record.
Oh, yes. Just this past week, and particularly this weekend, there was a large thing that occurred within the news you probably saw. It was, I don't know what you would call it, an argument between the United States and the country of Colombia about two, I guess they're the huge military planes filled with human beings that were deported by the United States back to Colombia, and Colombia refused to take them at first. The president of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, made a statement about that. And then there was a threat from the American side about tariffs, and then it appears today, as we record on Monday, January 27th, that tariff war, or whatever you want to call it, has not occurred, and Colombia has accepted these deported human beings. I guess we should just mention, just to give the geography here, the Darién Gap, if you haven't listened to that first episode, do, but it is between Central America and South America. It's a piece of land that connects Colombia to Panama, right? And that's why we're bringing this up, because Colombia is one of the primary countries involved here in the Darién Gap. And it's just, I think it's weird for us because where we live in Atlanta, we talk about this particular place, a sector, I guess, if they call it what do they call the Buford Highway
corridor?
Corridor, that's what they call it.
Yeah, a magical corridor, by the way. If you are ever fortunate enough to be there, just pick a random restaurant. Don't go for a chain. Just pick a random restaurant and then email us some pictures of the amazing experience you'll have. I have never gone wrong on Buford Highway, man. I don't think you have either.
Not once. And I lived right in the heart of that area, and there are major, as we speak right now, and over this past weekend, there are major ICE operations occurring there, where just families are getting torn apart because one or two people within a household is just being picked up by agents and shipped off.
Yeah. And again, this is a crucial part of the larger context. If you want to get some of the more up-to-the-minute updates, like you were describing there, Matt, you can check out the LA Times. They just came out with this. It's like you said, it's all over the news. The tariff trade war is on hold in sort of a quid pro quo for the resumption of those deportation fights. We know this can be a sensitive subject. As always, our goal is to navigate these things with accuracy and empathy.
Well, yeah, and the whole reason it's important to this story is that these are human beings that at some point took a journey to get to the United States, right? And whether or not they came through the Darién Gap, we don't know on an individual basis, but we do know that desire to get to the U.S. somehow was what generally, not always, pushes people through this area we're talking about in the Darién Gap.
And there may be an episode in a future evening related to migration overall, especially given the recent moves or signals in the U.S. domestic sphere of attempts to overturn the concept of citizenship by birth, which is potentially an explosive thing. So what about this, man? What if we pause for a word from our sponsors and then we come back with a brief recap or a regap? Regap? All right, we'll keep it. We'll keep it. Andrew, if there's a I earned it. So we'll come back and give you a brief recap of the Darién Gap as you had set up there, Matt, and then we'll dive further into the conspiratorial side of this story. Here are the facts. All right, so as you were saying, if you pull up your map of choice, right, whether that be print, whether that be something online, you can zoom into the northwest of Colombia, as you were describing, Matt, and you'll see it's connected to Panama via this isthmus. Sounds like a silly word, but it's the little, it might as well be a piece of string, continentally speaking, and it connects South America to Panama and all points north. This is the only land route to do that.
Oh yeah, everything else is going to be water if you're trying to get yourself or anything north. Yeah,
and it's called the Darién Gap nowadays because it is literally a gap. It is the only break in the Great Pan American Highway, which otherwise spans the entire left side of North and South America, which is a super impressive feat. But for multiple reasons, the powers that be have simply not completed any stretch of road through this gap, which is a 60-something mile region. Some places will call it 60 miles. Some will say more like 66 miles, but it's something that looks small. I love how you pointed this out in chapter 1. It's something that looks small on a regional or global map, but when you are walking on foot, it is huge.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. That would be that stretch you're talking about, Ben, or that length. That would be if you connected where the last road is in Panama to the last road in Colombia, or vice versa.
Yes. Yeah. And this failure to create, modern road system here comes as part of a much larger historical pattern. For centuries and centuries, outsiders have tried to establish footholds in this agglomeration of rainforest and mountains. But because of the weather, the punishing wildlife, the snakes, the scorpions, the constant threat of very serious diseases, nobody has cracked the case. The entire time, people who are living in indigenous communities in the area since time immemorial, they've watched these outsiders come and go. They live with the land. They're not trying to change it. Everybody from the outside who has attempted a large-scale community has either died or turned back.
Yeah. Yep. But if you do look at aerial photos, you will see that there are villages, there are small pockets where humans live. And again, a lot of that is indigenous peoples, but some of that is also the more nefarious side of this area, which is more modern peoples that have a moneyed interest in getting goods, let's say, which includes humans across that border.
Yeah. You'll see campsites. You'll see really sort of the equivalent of rest stops. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Fulfilling the same function that you might see for a rest stop on the interstate system here in the United States, right? A place to get off the road, to stop traveling, to eat. If you're lucky, pursue medical care in some cases, and then, safer places to sleep, all of which come at a cost. And that's the important part. It's incredibly difficult to build any permanent structure of size in this part of the world. And it reminds me of our previous conversations years ago on lost cities, right? When LiDAR was really rolling out, the jungle hungers it eats all the work of man, and I mean, if we think about it, even in Mesoamerican, Central American empires of old, they would build gargantuan temples, these gigantic stone structures, and within a relatively short span of time, the jungle would take them. So that's an active thing you're working against.
Well, yeah, we see what sand and wind can do to structures, right? Mm-hmm. Now imagine if it's living plants that are just enveloping everything, and then the sediment that forms, and it is nuts. Because not only does the jungle eat the stuff, it buries it.
Yeah. When we say eat, we do literally mean like cover and digest all the works of human beings. So there are also, of course, intense environmental concerns, right? Because this has such dense biodiversity. Anyway, those are several of the reasons no one's built a modern road through this area, and probably won't for the near future. And all those problems continue in the modern day, but with a twist. With a horrible twist, because as we record, more people are visiting the Darién Gap than ever in recent years. There is an alarming rise of people, thousands upon thousands of people, men, women, and children, attempting to traverse the gap on foot most often, and they're taking whatever they can carry, everything they own. They often have to liquidate any of their assets from their home country just so they have cash or funding to make this journey ultimately to the United States. And we didn't talk about it too much. We'll get into this in a second, but there are, this is a business. It is a business. It is run by cartels with the aid and approval of state security forces in some cases. And because it is a business, they are doing at least for me, the intensely aggravating thing that so many businesses do, which is tiered pricing, right? You have more money, you might get a horse, right? Or we could even take you on a motorcycle and a motorbike part of the way. Or, you could hop on a boat and try that. I don't know. I resent tiered pricing. I get it. I know it's a little Larry David, but, it's like when you go to buy a computer, why can't you just sell one that is the best one? Why do you have to sell these other ones that are less good? Sorry, unrelated.
Yeah. Capitalism. That's why.
Yeah, no, you nailed it. That's what it is. And look, the people who are doing this, they're not wealthy. Nobody is waking up and saying, well, I feel like I've achieved total success in Caracas. I have beaten Venezuela. So now I'm going to take my millions and I'm going to just go on a fun little trip. People are doing this because they feel they must. They feel that it is a matter of survival. And that's an important thing to always keep in front of mind whenever you hear conversations about migration or immigration, regardless of personal experience or political beliefs.
Yeah, but absolutely. Let's not forget the edge of the Darién Gap, at least as it is known in the Darién, I think it's the National Forest that's right there, or National Park, excuse me. And that is a border. That is a border area. So when you're thinking about those state security forces that you're mentioning, the ones that are, let's say, very likely paid and incentivized to allow certain people across and then keep others on the, from traversing through the Darién Gap. It is strange to imagine the statecraft involved there, mixed in that weird way. I was going to say stepped on by the cartels.
Yeah. I think that's appropriate. Yeah. Because as we discussed, the Gulf Clan, as they're typically known in shorthand in English, they are a huge cartel in Colombia. They got to the point where they do touch the government. they step on, as you said, some things. Their known associates include, colonels, include heads of security and heads of things like border control, or of course, anybody associated with import-export laws and policies. Just gonna pop the T on that one.
That's one of those things I never got as a kid, when there would be jokes about a joke or an aside someone makes about being into like, oh, I'm in imports and exports or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
I never
Oh,
understood any of that. That was in media, in all these movies that we watched as kids. Yes. That adults would like mention it, and all the adults around would be like, oh, I see.
Yeah. And I don't know why. I always assumed it was, furniture.
Fine china?
Yeah, rare spices, stuff that we associate with other countries. I'm with you there, man. I even knew like friends' parents who were import-export, legitimate business. Well, I think in their defense, as far as I could tell, I think they were probably just
art dealers.
Sure. Check out our episode on art and also free ports. I don't know, man. But yeah, you know what else it reminds me of? Totally unrelated. And I hope I'm not the only one who was a knucklehead about this. For years and years, up until college, I thought that package stores sold packages. I thought they sold packaging, and I was like, what is the real business here? Why are these places always so sketchy? None of these guys are carrying packages.
Yeah. Why does Dad need so many packages?
Oh,
man. It's a joke, Dad. It's a joke.
That's a joke for fellow dads. Yeah. So again, there's a lot going on here. There are some matters of not just historical context, but historical consequence. We learned that the Darién Gap plays a big role in why Scotland is not independent today, which was way out of left field. Do check out our previous episode for more on that. In the meantime, maybe we begin with the logical question we ended on previously. With all this horrible stuff being true, all these dangerous things, why would you choose Darién at all? Here's where it gets crazy. All right. People have been trying to get in and out for centuries, very little success. The growing trend that we're describing, fellow conspiracy realists, comes from a mix of desperation and also proven prior success of terrorist groups and international drug traffickers. They found that this is an effective way to move their other products, and so they didn't really do anything new, right? They just sort of expanded. I don't know. Is that accurate? I don't want to diminish it.
Oh, yeah. I would agree with you. It's a strange place there because there are not a bunch, like there's not a military base on the Colombian side or one on the Panama side. And there's no, when you think about who controls those borders, you do think about some form of official border protection force that is militarized, right?
Uniforms, a gate, a checkpoint,
Yes, that does not exist there. And you do have almost a gradient that exists there from both sides going into almost darkness when it comes to security forces.
Yeah. Well put. The Gap is one of the last true, what is sometimes called a black zone on the planet. It's a shorthand phrase for, we love to say it, a liminal space.
Aaron Mankey, shout out to you.
Shout out to our pal Mankey. Man, these shows are just so good. I'm going to say that too. It is a liminal space where the ordinary rule of law does not apply. And the Colombian authorities and the Panamanian authorities are both going to admit their problems, and they'll have very different opinions on who is responsible for those problems. The closest thing to rule of law in this lawless place is a network of drug cartels who are some of the world's most successful for-profit entities, up there with banks.
I love your note in the outline, Ben. Whatever, I said it.
I I don't think we're big enough for them to come after us. You know, if it was Josh and Chuck saying that, then maybe someone at Goldman Sachs would care.
Yeah, whatever. They know what they're doing. HSBC, Wachovia, all of them.
At all. This is a huge revenue stream. And I know we've both been reading a lot of these amazing firsthand accounts of journalists and NGO operatives who have traversed the gap or visited it, at least in part. And, you know, one article that stood out, I think, to all of us is from The Atlantic in August of last year by Caitlin Dickerson. There's another great one by Marion Blasberg and Gerald Bermudez, writing for Der Spiegel, I should say. And do check these out if you have the time, because they have photographs, they have firsthand conversations with people who are working for the cartels to facilitate the border or the crossing of the gap, and then families themselves who are attempting to survive, as well as NGOs. And I've got to say, Dickerson writes beautifully and has this note where she says the following, just to give you a sense of the cottage industry here. Everyone who works in the Darién Gap must be approved by the cartel and hand over a portion of their earnings. They built stairs into hillsides, outfitted cliffs with ladders, camps with Wi-Fi. They advertise it all on TikTok and YouTube, and anyone can book a journey online. There are many paths through. The most grueling is the cheapest, $300 USD equivalent to cross the jungle on foot. Taking a boat up the coast can cost more than $1,000. That's social media part, man. Ugh, that's rough.
Well, yeah, it's weird. It's weird to think that's how you would find out about it. I don't know. And again, everything there, written there, sounds like a similar journey that someone might take if they're trying to get across a border in an unofficial means or by an unofficial means, right?
Yeah.
You're not going through any kind of immigration, organization.
Passport control or anything. Yeah.
You're just getting across a border. What it makes me think about, just with the cost alone, if you're dishing out $300 to make the crazy on foot journey, that is perilous because of wildlife too, by the way. Remember, this is jungle. This is serious jungle area. You're going to do that, but then once you get into Panama, where do you go from there? Because the journey itself, if you are going as far north as the United States, or if you are just trying to get to just across a couple states to Costa Rica or something, there's a lot more steps and a lot more money that you have to pay out.
Absolutely. Even that bargain basement price, which does differ depending on the sources, even that bargain basement price does not include lodging. It does not include food, nor water, nor medical care. There's nothing like travel insurance here. You know what I mean? And it does not include someone maybe helping you carry stuff, right?
Yeah.
That everything we just named is an additional series of fees. And when this journalist in particular, Dickerson, decides to visit the Gap in person, and this happens more than once, she and her team are well aware of the immense danger in this pursuit. She spent some time talking with colleagues who have done similar investigations, and they're telling her stories of typhoid fever, bandits robbing people, sexual assault, death, and even perhaps in some ways the most ominous and terrifying, the fact that hundreds of people simply disappear in the jungle as if they were swallowed up in the green.
Yeah, that's unsettling.
I know, right? That's because usually you would expect that if someone is traveling in a group, and to lower the likelihood of being attacked by bandits, the cartel, at least on the Colombian side, because most people are traveling from the Colombian side to the Panamanian side, they encourage people to group up, right? If there are 50 of you, then you are far less likely to be attacked by a gang of like 5 bandits.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I also think about, let's say you did want to have personal protection as you went through there. I wonder what getting a firearm or, even, a handheld weapon of some sort, because it feels like you would need at least, a machete or something as you're
Mhm.
going through the jungle. And I guess that's why you pay your guides, because they're the people who have that stuff. And then you're
Mhm.
just a passenger, essentially, like you're going on a flight.
Yeah, you functionally could describe these cartel operatives, the assistants, as Sherpas.
Mm.
Like you would encounter summiting Everest. And if you're listening to this and you have summited Everest, congratulations, that's great. If you haven't, don't. Why?
Do
Why would you?
Sherpas carry ARs?
I guess it depends on the Sherpa and what kind of day they're having.
Yeah. All right.
I mean, that's a good question. We also know the tricky thing with firearms in that kind of situation is it becomes another liability as easily as an asset, because now you've got this thing that has to be constantly cleaned and maintained, right? And that somebody else might also want.
Mm-hmm.
So now, be careful how you sleep and when. It's not an ideal situation by any means. And Dickerson agrees with the policy missteps that we touched on a little bit in chapter 1. There is this idea that is incorrect, but it is a very popular idea. It's the concept that by making migration harder, you will limit the number of people who attempt it. It's like it's a prohibition argument, is it not?
Mm.
If we make cannabis illegal, then people won't smoke it. No, they'll go to the world of crime. They'll find a way to, smoke weed or whatever. And if you make legal migration harder, that's where it gets confused, right? If you make these migration policies higher, if you up the barrier for entry, you're not limiting the number of people who are still going to attempt a passage. You are pushing them to shift toward other means.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I don't want to get sidetracked, but I do wonder what is more dangerous, passing this Darien Gap or hopping in a shipping container kind of thing, which is another form, of getting across a longer distance to get into the US via that import-export thing. I
Right.
don't know which is worse, to be honest.
Yeah. They're two different flavors of equally terrifying horror, are they not?
Yeah.
The claustrophobia of the shipping container, especially if you're on a cargo vessel,
Yeah.
knowing that you cannot get out, right? You have to have the food that you brought with you from home, and more importantly, the water. Anybody who's ever hopped a train off the books knows that one of the things you most regret not bringing more of is going to be water.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to die there, it's also equally terrifying to be with your family in the middle of the unforgiving jungle.
Yeah.
And then have to figure out, beat me here, Andrew, have to figure out what you're going to tell your fucking 6-year-old, right? When they see some things that children should not see.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's very, it's harrowing, to realize there are a lot of people doing this and they don't really have a say because it goes to cartel crimes and crisis. We found a report by Human Rights Watch in 2023 that they compiled after visiting the Gap 4 times between April of 2022 and June of 2023. They interviewed 300 something people on the ground, and they found that the number of migrants in Latin America and the Caribbean more than doubled from 7 million to 15 million. This is more context. That's the largest global growth for international migrants anywhere in the world during that time. And the vast majority of these people, we've said it before, they're not criminals. They're refugees, asylum seekers. And the largest demographic of people traversing the Gap right now are people whose origin country was Venezuela. And Matt, you and I talked about that previously in part one, because that's, I think, by far and away the largest proportion of migrants, right?
Yeah, yeah. At least within that group that was studied, and those numbers that came from the International Organization for Migration looked at those numbers as well and confirmed them. But the Human Rights Watch, those are the findings from them. Yeah, over 440,000 people went from Venezuela through Colombia to get to the Gap to then get in through Panama.
And again, a fifth of these are children and adolescents. And some of these children are born on the journey.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're born because maybe an individual discovers they're with child, they're carrying a child, and they want to take an abortion, but the medical care for that is not available.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It reminds me of stories that I heard from a lot of the Cuban immigrants that came over, but it's not the same at all, because they were basically given the choice. Hey, you can stick around or you can get out right now. And leave everything and just get out. In this case, a lot of the folks in Venezuela see the shortcomings of the state, right, of the country, where there are the things that human beings need are no longer in very good supply, if at all, and you just have to leave because there's also, tensions between the government/military and a lot of the groups that would be considered counter to those folks. Even farmers who are just trying to live, and they realize, oh crap, I gotta get out of here.
Yeah. Rampant corruption, the police forces that may be meant to protect you may demand increasing bribes, may demand sexual favors, may threaten you and your loved ones. And then, the secessionist armed groups, of course, who want to create their own regimes. Some of those, candidly, were probably paid by Uncle Sam at some point.
Yeah. Or they at least, they don't care about you if you're a citizen of the country and just trying to live and have a family and grow a business and anything like that. It's not about you in their eyes.
Yeah, you are a resource. And the Gulf, okay, so already imagine making it from a terrible situation in Venezuela. Now you have reached the area of Colombia where you need to be to traverse the Gap. You run into the big business of the Gulf clan. They hold a monopoly here. They can decide pretty much everything. Which routes can be used by migrants as well as by locals, because remember, indigenous communities live there. They decide who can or cannot assist migrants on their journey. So everybody who is there selling water, selling Gatorade, selling Wi-Fi access, they work for the cartel, and they have to pay the cartel a pretty significant percentage of their fees.
Yep. You're talking about extortion at all the levels. Sorry to make this connection, but it does make me think about state, local taxes, sales taxes.
Yes, yeah, it's a taxation regime. I totally agree with that. I didn't think about that, but it's structurally similar, is it not? Yeah, and the punishments for selling stuff outside of school without, paying your local taxes, they are harsh because cartels don't have personal improvement plans. They don't have HR. They don't have, a court with a hotshot Clarence Darrow lawyer who will get you off the case.
It's a horrifying idea I just had, but cartel court, and it's like
who would not watch that?
Yeah, I mean, just the character you'd have to put as the judge. You have to figure out the character, but it could be pretty compelling.
The judge is older.
Yeah.
The judge has glasses, but not an eye patch.
Yeah.
Maybe bifocal glasses, or what do they call them? Readers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mysterious tattoo. kind of peeking out from the neck of the robe.
Runs a fast food chicken joint.
Nailed it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, it's Gus Frink. Gus Frink is the judge of cartel court.
I think so.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. There's no way to plea a case. The Colombian military. Now, how much money does the Klan make from just this? This is only one of their many revenue streams. Well, it depends upon whom you ask. Panama will tell you one thing. OAS will tell you another. The U.S. will tell you another. The Colombian military will tell you that the Klan, on average, gets $125 per person crossing the gap from 2022 to 2023. But that varies widely. And again, honestly, from everything we've encountered about this, you can't fully trust the Colombian military on the numbers they're reporting, right?
Why?
I mean, they seem pretty... I don't want to get in trouble with the Colombian military, man. What if we have to go?
We're just saying that somebody along the line probably takes a little bit off the top too, and that's probably not calculated in.
Yes. Yeah. At every level. Just like that weird film, right? Where everybody lives in the tower and the food comes down this platform.
Oh, I know that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Is the name of it The Platform? It probably is. Noel would know. Everybody is taking something at every single step. It's incredibly important to remember that. That's why other estimates will say $300 or more per person. And no, there are no discounts for elderly, veterans, or children. That means a documented income, according to the not fully trustworthy Colombian military, is $57 million from January to October of 2023. All profit for the cartel. Almost certainly they're making more money than that.
Well, because that is just the human trafficking part, right?
Yeah, and this is human trafficking. That's an important note. Yeah, this is just the migrant money. This is not counting the cocaine. This is not counting weapons trade. This isn't counting any of the other stuff.
Wow.
And that's all before we get to Panama. Like you said, Matt, the Panamanian side is even worse. What say we pause for a word from our sponsors and maybe we take a hypothetical journey through the gap together?
Oh, for sure. By the way, is that $57 million before taxes or? Sorry.
We've returned. All right, we're journeying through the gap together with you, fellow conspiracy realists. You are with Andrew and Matt and myself. We're drawing on the experiences of locals, of survivors, journalists, doctors, government agents, NGOs, and more than a few criminals. All right, how do we get there? First things first, to get through it, you have to get to it.
Yeah, a lot of people go traversing on foot. You can, again, if you're coming from Venezuela and you can afford to put all of your luggage into a car, then you would probably do that. Again, a boat is a good way to get there too. It is super dangerous to take that boat ride along the coast on either side of the gap going from Colombia to Panama. But again, that's why you pay $1,000 per person to get on a sanctioned boat that's not going to get shot at or pirated.
Exactly. Yeah. Gosh, it makes you feel terrible for the people who just have to get on a boat every day as part of their livelihood. Someone who sells fish at the local coastal market. They probably have to pay multiple organizations or gangs or groups, right? Not even counting whatever fishing license they have to get. It's tough out there. And what you're pointing out there, Matt, is these first steps are in their own ways as dangerous as traversing the gap itself. At any point, you could be stopped by bandits. You could be stopped by corrupt local or state level authorities. You could just have bad luck, Your car breaks down. The weather is bad. There are no refunds in this kind of thing.
Yep. And then you finally get there. and you get corralled, kind of like you're showing up at Disney World. Just
exactly
not the one you want to be at, but the one you have to be at, or at least you feel that you need to be there. That's the thing where it's almost like the tour guide situation. So they tell you who you're going to go with, who's going to be your guide. Here are all the supplies that you need. If you don't have them yet, you're going to need to pay a little extra to make sure you've got enough water for your team.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. At an exaggerated cost. At this point, we're at a place that would be called Hacienda Las Tecas. And we're pulling a little bit of this from the Spiegel article mentioned earlier. You're hearing the announcements through a megaphone. This is like going to Disney World. It is like the crowd organization is very much like that, or Universal Studios, where they say, okay, this following group file in here. And the groups vary in size, but they do want larger groups because it lowers the chances of banditry during the journey, or at least I should say unsanctioned banditry.
Yeah.
Because I bet some of those bandits are approved too. I bet there's a mix of things.
Yeah, I'm sure. And then when you're actually going on your journey there, it is, at least from the reports we've seen of human beings who have gone and now come back to report on it, there are basically a series of guide colors.
Yes.
That are taped around trees. You may have seen this kind of thing before at like a national park or something, where there are areas and paths that are, sometimes there's signage, other times it is like color coded. So you can just be aware. It's like that, but it's a little more complex and probably a little more dangerous.
Yeah. If you've ever been out in the woods, you've probably seen some stuff like this. Often here in this part of the United States, path through the wilderness may be marked with just like a strip of plastic or spray paint.
Mm-hmm.
If you see this spray paint, keep going. This is a system that works really well for keeping people on the right track. From what we understand, generally blue or green means keep it going, keep on trucking. Red means wrong way, turn around now, quick, fast, in a hurry, keep going till you're back on that blue-green path. This is all explained to you and your group over a megaphone. And while they're explaining this, they're also allowing the porters or the various guides on the Colombian side of the border to come up to you and ask you if you want to buy something, if you want them to carry something for you. And until you get to the Panamanian side, those porters are with you. Or they're around. So in addition to the fabric around the trees, fabric or plastic telling you the right path, you're also going to see these porters going back and forth, and they'll additionally do things like kind of clean the path or try to, they're the ones with the machete. They're clearing the path out because it will get overgrown so very quickly if it is not constantly maintained.
Yeah, you're talking like a week.
Yeah.
I remember overgrowth in my backyard here in Georgia. I let it go a week as I was trying to clear a couple paths back to where the water is. Basically, there's a creek back there. Mm-hmm. And I gave it a week off. And I came back, and the vines, specifically the vine growth, is so intense.
Yeah. And we're home to kudzu here. Do you have any kudzu in your backyard?
Not anymore, baby.
Hey, nice. Good. No mercy on that stuff, right?
Yeah. No bamboo either. Screw that stuff.
You're not a bamboo fan?
It looks great, but it is evil. If you don't control where it goes.
It is an expansionist force. Yes. I love that we're immediately going to statecraft and military terms with lawn care.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a very on brand thing.
Tunnels underground, and you don't know where it is.
Right. Yeah. We should start our own lawn care, maybe not company, but just our own brand of products.
Based in statecraft, terminology. Okay, cool.
Yes. and the actual mechanics, like get some handheld LiDAR to figure out where that sneaky bamboo's going.
And see, you cut it off and you think you've cut it off at its source, but no, that's not the nature of those root systems. They will proliferate.
It goes deeper. Yeah. And also, one important part for this journey that people are taking, there is going to be, I mean, this is a very scary moment for people. It's for a lot of folks, it may be the most dangerous, like immediately dangerous thing they've ever done. So there's going to be a prayer. A pastor will climb up onto a fence so they can address the crowd, and then they will pray together, and they'll say, you know, let's not think of the dangers. Let's not dwell on the dangers. Let's think of the future ahead. There's a reason we are doing this, and God is on our side. And the sun rises, and the journey begins. And then you set off. At first, the journey, I mean, it's very scary, but for some people, it doesn't feel that bad. You know, I'm not going to say it's a jaunty vibe, but for some people, you know, I'm saying, hey, okay, we can do this, right? We've already come so far. In many cases, that's true. You know, imagine you came from China or Pakistan or Cameroon or Angola. This is just another leg of a much longer journey.
And this is like the hardest part, theoretically, right? And if we can get through this, we're good. And it's not going to be that bad, is what you're being told by the people who just took a bunch of your money.
Yeah. They are very much going with a used car salesman vibe. No offense to used car salesmen. We're talking about the trope, right? The idea of like, hey, yeah, you know, this may not be a brand new Ford Pinto. And yeah, maybe you've heard some things about Ford Pintos, but this little guy, you know, he's got heart, you know. You don't need to change the oil that much. It doesn't leak that much. You know, and the tires are different ages individually, but that's, you know, that's an advantage.
We've got Gatorade. It's only $6 US per bottle. It's fine.
Which is crazy. And then also the time. How long does it take? As part of this downplaying of the risk and embellishing of the rewards or the odds of success, migrants are often told this is a 2-day journey. That is not the case. And they just mean 2-day journey sort of through the gap up to the Panamanian side. And the Colombian side of the border, because of the regime instituted by the cartel, is far more heavily regulated. That's where you're going to see more things like the you know, the resting areas, if you can pay for them, the guides and stuff. But Matt, I think it's safe for us to say that most people are not getting through there in 2 days.
No, and especially if you consider the amount of stuff that you feel that you need to carry when you're moving your entire life somewhere, right? And we've seen that it's often the case where, you know, somebody will end a journey if they make it all the way through with half the things that they brought along with them, if not less. It gets down to essentials as it gets more grueling out there.
Yeah, and the weight weighs upon you, right? And you don't have the same constant sources of nutrition or hydration. You may be dealing with a medical issue. How do we put it in our previous recording? The kind of, in wildlife in general, or in the wilderness in general, the kind of thing that you could cure with a trip to Duane Reade or CVS can spell disaster if you don't have access to something as simple as antibiotics, you know?
Yeah.
And then people barter stuff when they run out of money. And then sometimes, to your point, people just shed the stuff because they have to keep going.
Yeah.
So, Matt, what's the more realistic, non-salesman-y amount of days?
Well, yeah, they'll sell you on 2, and then depending on the weather, depending on, you know, whatever you encounter out there, it might be just 3 days. It could be a whole week, 7 days. It could be more than that. It could be like 10 days.
Yeah. Depending on mobility, the weather, like you said, just the luck. And that's why in the age of ubiquitous social media, remember, Folks, we were disturbed to learn that this is widely advertised on TikTok and YouTube and so on because they need those videos to look successful, to look aspirational, and
just like a hike.
Yeah. In the beginning of the route, these different cartel operatives, the porters, essentially, are going to be filming migrants, maybe even talking to them. Look at this family boldly strolling toward the future. Strolling being the key word, right? Not struggling. And they do that a lot during the first day because it's a business. And every piece of video that you can get showing people who appear not to be having a terrible time, that brings more people to you later. And these guys are not out to kill everybody. Obviously, they need it to be successful for this massive revenue stream to continue. I think what we should instead say, to be more accurate, is they have some kind of internal acceptable rate of attrition, right? It's okay we don't know what that is, but it's okay for a certain amount of people to die, to be robbed, to be assaulted, to disappear.
Well, yeah, it's tough to go on Yelp and find firsthand reviews of, the group that's going to take you through the Darién Gap, right? It's tough to see a review from somebody who didn't make it.
Yeah.
Just saying,
exactly.
that doesn't exist. So if you can make it look as though everything's easy and safe and fun and okay, and the appearance is more, it's going to bring you more revenue. And ultimately, this is a business.
And while profit-driven, the porters themselves are not super villains. No. You can read reports where they're trying to pass information on, like, please check on, they're going back the other way, right? And you're passing them, and they're saying, hey, please check on this one person. We had to leave them at a rest stop or something. And I think before we get to the Panamanian side, we got to talk about that rest stop. Party stops along the route. There are camps you can access. The porters have brought hot dog stands, seriously, refrigerators, even pool tables and Wi-Fi, and you can play with all of it for a fee. If you are lucky, when we stop at this rest stop, we may find someone from Doctors Without Borders. This is not a thing that can happen all the time, but you may find those absolute heroes out there, and they may be able to assist you with a medical condition. We know that this is also an opportunity for people to get their family and their loved ones in other countries to wire them additional funds. So you pay like $2 for Wi-Fi access. You get your family member, maybe in the US, to wire you some more money, and you get to check in and let them know that you are alive. And then that electronic transfer also has a fee, about 20%. But it's better than nothing. And then when you get closer to Panama, you make a final payment to the Colombian side, to the cartel. And when you make the payment, at least in recent years, they give you a wristband, just like at a music festival or a Dragon Con. That is your proof that you paid. So now we assume we're the worse for wear, but we're alive. We have made it. Not everybody has, but we have made it. And we approach the Panamanian side of the gap.
Yeah. And it's tough because once you get to the Panamanian side, this is where at least Human Rights Watch has reported a lot of nefarious things maybe increasing, let's say, or the chances of, things like being robbed, sexually abused. Yeah, it can't, again, at least from the reporting, it sounds pretty heinous. It is just really tough to maybe square in your mind, because this is also where you've got a lot of the indigenous peoples that are living right along in this area. So I think not even on purpose, especially by reporters, who are going out there saying this kind of thing, I think it can be maybe put together in your head subconsciously. And that is not what is happening. I don't know how to say that correctly.
No, I hear you, because there's because people want to form connections, right?
Mm-hmm.
Observe structures, and there is a feedback loop at play that we have seen in some cases. We have to remember, for decades and decades before this was, what people called a migration superhighway, it was a drug trafficking superhighway. There was a lot of crime and weapons trafficking as well. And the indigenous Panamanian communities, just living their lives, were constantly beset by drug cartels, by paramilitary groups, by people with firearms, and very little in the way of oversight. So over time, logically, these communities took up arms themselves. They began practicing self-defense. And eventually, this is, I think, the pattern connection we're talking about here, Matt. Eventually, some of these groups, a minority, also got involved in crime and trafficking. And then they became they were attacking outsiders. They became, in some ways, very similar to the villains that they were originally defending themselves against. They became the monsters.
Yeah, for sure. And you can read about that in some writing that the International Crisis Group has done. Yeah, they cite, I think, 200 incidents of sexual violence that were reported by various aid groups inside the Darién Gap on the Panama side in the first half of 2023.
Yeah. Yeah. And the problem with those reports, like anything on this road, is that we have to also logically assume that the number of reported cases is much smaller than the number of actual incidents, because, we have to say it. A lot of times people aren't going to report things because they're worried about being the nail that sticks out, being punished for reporting. Worst of all, being sent back, right? When you've already got this far. So we know that even in the state-supported migration centers, there are rampant accusations of abuse, especially against vulnerable women and children. This is a heartbreaking thing to note. By this point in the journey, it is not infrequent that some travelers, particularly female travelers, may be driven into sex work to continue paying for their passage or to protect their children.
Yep. Ugh. Yeah. We talked about the Border Patrol as a thing that was, we didn't say non-existent. Let's say light. But the border is protected in some ways. I didn't know about this place, Ben. There's apparently one place, basically, that migrants coming from the Colombian side to the Panamanian side can get through, or maybe, I don't know.
ETRM.
Yeah, what is this?
This is, okay, so the Panamanian government has strict laws against assisting migrants, no matter where they're from, no matter where they're going. Very strict laws against it. And there's one spot where you can assist these migrants coming from the Darién Gap. That is the ETRM, a temporary reception center where you can go for a minute, right? That's a safe place you can go. You can find assistance. You cannot stay there. You are not a Panamanian citizen. This is not your new home. You will meet travel agents, for lack of a better word, all around the CTRM, and you pay something like $40, I think it's $60 now, these are all US prices, to ride across Panama on private buses. And the private buses also have an agreement or a sanction, so they're far less likely to get attacked than your ordinary tourist charter bus, right? And this is a thing that can happen in Central America, country to country. If you've been there, you know that. Once you get on that private bus, you go across Panama. They take you close to the border of Costa Rica. Then you get on another set of private buses for a $30 fee, and you cross Costa Rica to other humanitarian facilities that are close to the border of Nicaragua. And then you meet the Nicaraguan officials. Guess what they also want? Money.
Mm-hmm.
So then you have to pay them, I think it's approximately $150 to enter Nicaragua, and then you continue your journey. And this doesn't, this Darién Gap stuff doesn't involve any of that. Once you're out of Colombia, the Gulf Clan considers your business concluded. And now you're interacting with a series of other regimes, a series of other traffickers. And there are so many other dangers posed by trying to move through Mexico before you ultimately reach the US border. And a lot of people get stuck on the way. They can't go to the US, but they can't go back. This happens to a ton of Venezuelan nationals. I was not aware of this, but people can be stranded in Guatemala or other countries because they can't legally re-enter Panama, even if they want to go back home.
Yeah, because that would be the only way. Wow. That's terrible.
It's, yeah, it's not an ideal case. And I do think, there's so much more to explore about this, but we were talking off air, you and I, about one note that we need to hit: terrorism concerns. So this pops up pretty often in recent years where someone will claim, usually a politician will claim, the US border is porous and it's a national security threat because terrorists are pouring into the country. And sometimes when you look at policy papers, you'll see security analysts saying, what about the Darién Gap, right? It's much easier to visit a country in South America than it is to visit the US. If you're a no good Nick, if you're coming from a different country that maybe is not so friendly with the US, where you would get high scrutiny, like if you're, and we're not trying to pick on anybody, this happens all the time, but if, let's say you're an Iranian national and you ultimately want to get to the US, and you know that it's going to be a real process, right, for you to land in LaGuardia. So why don't you land in Ecuador and then just travel up the gap? That's what people are concerned about, because they think people are doing it they think that people are utilizing this passage for terrorist activities. And it's a shame that it's politicized so hard, but I think we should talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, we've got an example via the Justice Department, a former Al-Qaeda fighter named Shihab Ahmed Shihab. And this is from 2022, so just a couple years ago. This person was arrested by the FBI and charged with trying to carry out some form of terror-based assassination against George W. Bush.
Yes, yeah. And he really thought he was doing it. This is not someone scoring political points in an election. This guy was living in Indiana and Ohio. He was residing in the U.S., and he wanted to bring terrorist forces through the Darién Gap to, as you said, Matt, assassinate former President George W. Bush. There was a lot of money on the line. You can read the full story in detail, and there's a lot to it. But essentially, he got connected with undercover FBI, and he said, look, I've already smuggled in 2 Hezbollah operatives over the gap. And now I think we can replicate that process. So we reached out to some of his former colleagues in Iraq. They had a unit that was once called Thunder in Arabic, and they said, okay, maybe we can pay 4 individuals, give them $40,000 each to travel to Brazil on fake visas, then go up through the gap, and then enact our plan to kill George W. Bush for revenge against what his administration did to our country, to Iraq. And he got caught. He has been cooperating with U.S. forces. It seems that other criminal orgs are aware of the problems posed by the Darién Gap, and the increase in overall migration of innocent people makes it much easier for the wolves to blend in with the sheep, Like the point you made, there's no passport control. Nobody's even filling out a survey.
The most important part of any transaction is the Google survey that occurs afterwards.
There's so many surveys. Do you ever do them?
I think I've done a couple to help out a business that I really appreciated, like, I don't know, helping me out, or they were really good or a deal, but it's only happened, gosh, 3 times in my entire life, maybe.
Yeah, I'll do surveys if I've had to go on the phone with someone for something complicated. You know what I mean? Because we've spent time together. And like, no, Jacob, you have a great week.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and you got to shout out in that particular human being, because maybe that will actually help them on their performance review.
We hope so. Yeah, because it's tough to be on the phone all day for your job. And anyway, the larger context, there's this feedback loop. A government is unstable. Like, let's take Haiti. A government is unstable. It prompts residents to move. As they move, as they depart legally or not, the labor force gets depleted. That makes it much harder for the economy to recover. Because now if we have jobs, we don't have people to fill the jobs, which means the economy grows even worse, which means even more people leave.
And now you need foreign aid from the United States or China.
Ding, ding, ding. Yeah, it's a proven system. Mm-hmm. Try not to make a judgment on it other than saying that it has been proven. Well, okay, you know what? We're going long. Maybe we
John
wrap
Perkins. Up. John Perkins, is that the guy, the economic hitman? Is that his name?
Oh, yeah. Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Mm-hmm. He got really into shamanism.
Oh, cool.
So a full 97% of migrants who are willing to be interviewed by Human Rights Watch, by other sources, they all said that despite all of their travels and whatever their country of origin may be, traversing the Darién Gap was by far the most dangerous part of their passage. They can't report crimes to the Panamanian nor Colombian authorities. And for now, the upward trend in migration, or the overall trend in migration, is on an upward trajectory. The numbers might fall some years, rise some others, but the overall trend is an upward curve. And governments keep making politically self-serving statements. Innocent people are going to continue to die out there in the jungle, hoping for a fair shot at the American dream. But how do we fix it? You know what I mean?
We decide that every human consciousness is the same, and we don't allow billionaires anymore. No, I don't know. I don't know how you fix any of this.
Yeah, no, I do think I will say it. I do agree with you. I don't think we should have billionaires.
I don't know. Whatever.
I feel like you get, how about this? Have we talked about this? You get $1 billion. You reach $1 billion by hook or by crook, whatever. And then you get like that little gold play button they used to give us on YouTube when or platinum. You get something like that. And instead of a play button, it has a C for capitalism. Like, you have won. Here is your capitalism award, right? And then you get to start over.
Yeah, and you can use that as capital of some sort just by having the button.
Yeah, you get like discounts at Dave and Buster's.
Yeah.
You get, you get better seats on planes, but now you have to fly commercial.
And it's a status thing. So you hit that status. Now you can get the really cool stuff that you wanted as a billionaire, but the billions actually get to go out to help, make humanity and the earth better.
And you get to keep a couple million.
Oh, for sure. And you can use it however you want.
Do whatever. And I think we've solved it. We've solved it because that would help emphasize the fact that a lot of people seem to forget here. These are not soulless statistics. These are people. They want and deserve all the same dignity we hope all people can enjoy. But what's happening is that elephants are making war for their own reasons. When elephants make war, it's the grass that suffers.
Yep.
And with that, we want to hear from you folks. Thank you for taking this journey with us. We hope anyone who has traversed the gap or gone on a similar journey, we hope that you survived. We hope you and your loved ones are safe. If you have personal experience with this, please reach out to us in so much as you are comfortable. Let us know what's going on. You can find us online. You can find us via email, telephonic device. We're Conspiracy Stuff Show on Instagram, Conspiracy Stuff on Twitter and YouTube. And if you don't sip the social meds, stay tuned for our episode about social media.
Oh, yeah.
You give us a phone call.
Yeah, you can call us. As Ben said, tell us about your stories. Tell us if you know someone who's being affected by the ICE stuff and the immigration stuff that's happening in the United States right now or in the country where you live. Just what is that feeling like to you? What do you see in the future? As a lot of countries around the world seem to be set on a more isolationist path.
Mm-hmm.
Just tell us your thoughts. Our number is 1-833-STDWYTK. When you call in, give yourself a cool nickname and let us know in the message if we can use your name and message on the air. If you've got more to say than can fit in a 3-minute voicemail, why not instead send us a good old-fashioned email? We are
the entities that read each piece of correspondence we receive. Be well aware, yet unafraid. Sometimes the void writes back. For this in particular, folks, please be safe out there. If you have any personal experience, share it with us and more importantly, your fellow listeners. It would also be immensely helpful, again, only if you are comfortable, in sharing things that more people contemplating these journeys need to be aware of from your experience. What do you wish you had known before you crossed the gap? Conspiracy at iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.